because it is a distillery that is practically touching the Arctic Circle. How are you, dear friends of Talking About Whiskey, your favorite whiskey channel? My name is Eduardo, and here we are again in Madrid, the capital of Spain, to make a new, as I always say, interesting video about the world of whiskey. Today with a very special whiskey. We have a Viking whiskey, a Norwegian whiskey. There you have it. It overexposes me a bit, I think. I have moved a bit away. There you have it, Prost. Alfheim. This is the expression of this Viking whiskey. And now I'll tell you a little anecdote about where this whiskey comes from. It is an Arctic single malt whiskey. 46% ABV, 50 centiliter bottle. It is a whiskey that is made in, as I mentioned, Norway at the Bivros distillery. It's a distillery, which is a very crazy thing because it's a distillery that is practically touching the Arctic Circle. I mean, you look at the map and it's a former NATO warehouse, if I'm not mistaken, that has been converted into a distillery next to a glacier where you can also see the northern lights. There is a hotel owned by the distillery and whales roam around in the sea there. It's an absolutely insane thing. I met Thor. Can you believe it? Who is the owner and CEO of the distillery, thanks to our friends from Isumer in Madrid. Plus, the guy is a Viking. I mean, it's just crazy. Absolutely crazy. So, I met him here at the Gourmet Club, at the Gourmet Fair, in the Gourmet Hall. Sorry, I was there recently. And then, well, I met this man. I was talking to Thor. He gave me a sample of a whiskey that I have here, which we will also try, and, well, I invite you to visit the Vibros website to see that this is something crazy, okay? Additionally, Vibros Alfheim is the expression. They are making the expressions. They are, the names they give them, like Alfheim, or this one, for example, which is Midgard, are gods from Scandinavian mythology, from Viking mythology. If you look closely, the bottle has some motifs here, well, absolutely. With this symbolism as well. With those runes, those Viking things, I think that's what they're called. And it's a whiskey, well, something super special. I mean, just from the anecdote of how I met them, where they produce it, it's something very crazy. Absolutely very crazy. So, it's a whiskey that tells us here that, if I remember correctly, it is finished in ex-bourbon and virgin oak, meaning it has a kind of double maturation. And of course, it matures at practically a temperature of about 0.6 degrees throughout the year. It is physically signed, I would say. I mean, the signature, I believe, is handwritten. No, but it doesn't look like it's from a computer. I mean, it's his butt copied by computer by Thor Peter Christensen, who is the creator and founder of this madness. You have to be quite crazy to do these things. Additionally, to reach the distillery, you have to take a ferry, which is quite an adventure, navigating through frozen fjords. It is located at 69 degrees north, making it the northernmost distillery in the world. They use local barley and water from Norway's glaciers. It's absolutely incredible. So, let's pour a little of this Brost Alfheim on the right, which is the whiskey that my friends from Isumer sent me. And we'll also put the last part of a sample that I got from Midgard, which is another expression they make. We'll put it here on the left. I have very little left because it's a whiskey I liked a lot. And I had a glass with your permission. What's this called, you see? Well, it's a sample inspired by Midgard. There you have it, Midgard, a very curious thing. So thank you very much, Thor, for the samples and for your kindness, your time, and also that you have a hotel. The curious thing is that you can go to the hotel. He told me that the best time to go is around April, something like that, the best time to go. And you are there enjoying your whiskey. They show you the distillery because they also do a tour, of course, of the distillery. And, well, in the midst of glaciers and whales, it's absolutely crazy. Well, they are whiskeys. I think this one can no longer be found. I think because it is 46%, because a very peculiar thing they have is that they make the whiskeys by seasons. By seasons, that is, this year they made this one and there won't be more. I mean, they keep evolving it, they keep changing it. Obviously, these must be very young whiskeys. I don't think this whiskey is more than 3 or 4 years old, and I had no idea about this distillery. The prices, it's an expensive whiskey here in Spain. I think I've seen it for around 60 or something like that. It's a NAS whiskey, and it doesn't indicate if it has coloring or if it's chill filtered. My impression is that it doesn't. I think it doesn't say anything, but, well, I don't know. I can't tell you, because if it doesn't say, you have to take a last look. We could try to confirm it, but handcrafted, handmade, I suspect not, because it would be strange, right? It would be strange for something so handmade to be so... Let's say it's authentic, right? so to speak. It might have coloring, filtering, I don't know. My impression is that it doesn't, but I can't confirm it for you. I haven't always talked, it didn't tell me anything, and I don't see anything on the bottle. So, well, let's see what this Afghan Bivros suggests to us on the nose. Wow, I have to tell you, it has an incredibly pleasant nose. The cereal note is very strong, a very intense cereal note. Barley, it's clearly a single malt, and there's a note that's a bit curious. There are some slightly oily notes, like a bit of olive oil, those slightly fatty notes. It is also very sweet at the same time. Not alcoholic at all, with extraordinary alcohol integration. There is also a very intense wood note, resins like a cork that you would have taken from a cork oak, and it would have come out very fresh. There are some spices, some cinnamon as well, and very characteristic, let's say relatively similar to what would be a Scottish whiskey from the Highlands, for example, of quality. It reminds me a bit of a Glencadama without the nose, meaning something intense, something strong, but well constructed every time. It smells very good, and you can really notice the barley and the wood. The cereal is very noticeable. And in this whiskey, the virgin oak is also quite noticeable, because it's clear that ex-bourbon casks always contribute a certain amount, depending on the number of refills, right? But certainly the virgin oak is noticeable in quite a lot. A note like lavender as well, a bit floral. A whiskey on the nose that is certainly very interesting, very rich, very pleasant. Very, very, very good whiskey on the nose. Very rich. Very, very much reminds me a bit sometimes of a Speyside, or reminds me a bit of this Spey I have here. Regarding those notes, the distillation is superb, meaning there is not a single off note, no metallic taste, absolutely nothing. A very well-made whiskey on the nose. Let's look at the other whiskey, Midgard, which, if I remember correctly, gave me the impression that it had some sherry or something like that. Yes, I would say that this whiskey does have some type of aging. It is similar to the other one, but it does have some type of aging. Pedro Jimenez Oloroso or something like that, but rather on the sweet side, in my opinion. In my opinion, I have very little whiskey left, but it's very delicious too. Very sweet notes as well. Here, there is more caramel. The notes are more concentrated. That sweetness, that bun, slightly fermented notes too, a bit rancid undoubtedly, from a perspective that there is Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez or something like that. Very rich. It smells a lot like wood too, a lot like short. It's a curious thing, fermented note, rancid, but interesting. Very pleasant. It doesn't smell like a sewer, or a drain like other whiskeys do, which sometimes have those Pedro Jimenez, those distillations that don't quite know what's happening. Well, let's see what Afheim, the ancient Viking land, suggests to us for a toast. I don't know how to say cheers in Viking. I have absolutely no idea, so I'll just say cheers. Without a doubt, as confidently as I can. It is a young whiskey, an intense whiskey, a spicy whiskey. I like it more on the nose than on the palate. It is a whiskey that tends more towards astringency and dryness, but it is a very well-made whiskey. At certain moments, it gives a bit of a reminiscence of gin or rum. This is a product of the distillation process. There is something with an intensity in terms of distillate that is noticeable. The effect of the wood on the palate is much less than the effect of the wood on the nose. In my opinion, I prefer whiskeys that are a bit sweeter on the palate. For my taste, this whiskey tends a bit towards astringency and dryness. But it's an intense whiskey, a young whiskey, curious, very good, very tasty. What's going on? Where do I see the potential problem with this whiskey? That it is an expensive whiskey. So of course, it is an expensive whiskey that has some notes. It is interesting, it is well made, but the problem with all these world whiskeys, whether they are Spanish, Norwegian, German or whatever, is that you think, Joe, for $60 or $70, do I take the risk or do I go for the Scotch? This is the big problem with these whiskeys. That's why, for me, these brands always, well, in Norway, what happens is that $60 is like $35 here. Percent, well, not exactly, but it could be like $40 here. So the labor is Norwegian. The cost of producing a whiskey under those conditions is very high, but it has the handicap that you have to offer something with a differential added value to position yourself ahead of a Scotch, even a quality bourbon. This is the big problem with this. I think this whiskey is very good, but it probably has an issue entering Spain because the price is very high and people are left with doubts. That's my opinion, but it's a very interesting whiskey, very rich on the palate. However, it is a bit more astringent and drier than what I usually like. Let's see. I like Midgard more. It suits my taste profile better. A much sweeter whiskey with much more wood influence. And in my opinion, a slightly different distillation as well. Both are 46. 46. 46? Yes, they are both 46. Okay, well, in my opinion, Midgard is a whiskey. I mean, I don't know how much Midgard costs. I have no idea. But it reminds me much more, of a Lieber cask strength, a Sackman, a Macallan of that style, with those sherry notes. I'm not saying they are the same, but just to give you an idea of where that whiskey is going. Much sweeter, much more fruity, yet it still has a touch of astringency and dryness, a bit like the other one, but this one is much more astringent and much drier. Whiskey is very interesting, rich whiskeys that are very good, but certainly if this costs the $60 or $70 that I have seen in Spain, these people are probably going to have a problem. I'm sorry to say it, but it's true. That is, I find it hard to decide. If I had to choose between this one Glencadama and Signatory, Vintage, etc., well, it's difficult. It's difficult because it's a rich whiskey, well made, well constructed, but in my opinion, it doesn't offer something exceptional compared to other types of whiskey. So, the price entry barrier might be tough to overcome. It's tasty, it's good. Would I ever buy it? Yes, of course I would, and it would certainly make a very exotic gift. Look, a Viking whiskey, a Norwegian whiskey, a whiskey of that style is good, it's tasty, and it's interesting. I can't tell you that it's a bad whiskey, not at all. Very exotic, as you can see. See you in the next video on the channel. If you don't mind, please remember to always drink in moderation and be very happy because, well, in the end, as I always say, that's the most important thing in life. A hug, take good care of yourself. See you soon. Bye. See you.